Okay, hello and welcome to our video about geometric proportions in portraiture. So in class, we went over this long list of geometric proportions, and we are going to go over it again, and we are going to mark on one of the copies of this black and white set of portraits. So we have a front view and a profile view of a staff member. I have the lovely Mrs. Crowley. She and I are close friends, and I adore this picture of her, and she has agreed to let me use her likeness in this video. I gave you two copies, okay? I gave you two copies so that you would have one that you could kind of mess up and still have one that would be fine to use. This color version, I want you to keep close track of. Make sure you bring it all back to class, but especially this one. I gave you this one for reference. So when I printed these out, I grayed them out, I lowered the contrast and increased the brightness so that it would be easier to see your marks when you draw on this. But anyway, so here's my backup. I'm gonna put this one aside completely. I'm gonna use this one as a reference because these nice vibrant colors are gonna help me if there's something in this grayed out black and white one that I can't see very well, okay? So I've given you some warnings. Two major mistakes are placement of the ear and making sure that there's enough room in both the forehead and the back of the head so that the person can have a brain. So we don't need to mark that, but that's what the beginning of this says under general warning to the beginning portrait artists. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to read, I'm just going to go through and read these just like we did in class, and then we're going to talk about them and we're going to mark them on the paper so you can just follow along with me. Hopefully, you know, this won't take too long. The eye line is the imaginary line that runs horizontally through the center of the eyes and is parallel to the central axis, even when the head is tilted. So if I go from inside corner to inside corner, it's easier if I look at the bottom of my ruler just so that you guys can see what I'm doing, although I expect you to do the opposite and look at the top if that's more comfortable, whatever works for you. I have a clear ruler because I think that's going to help me see things a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to go through the center of her eye, straight across, and make the eye line. And I don't want to dig through the paper. Okay, and then I'm gonna go perpendicular to that and find the center of her face. And she's actually a little bit tilted in her head, so. Okay, there's my central axis. And this, no matter where she moves, is gonna be still perpendicular, these two lines. The eye line is in the center of the head between the chin and the top of the head. So the vertical distance from the inside corner of the eye to the tip of the chin, which is this distance, is going to be equal to the distance from the inside corner of the eye to the top of the head. Okay, so I don't want to count her hair, but I'm going to actually measure this. And I'm going to go from the inside. Let's see, I'm going to count her chin is right here. I'm going to make a line there so that I know where I'm measuring from, and we'll see. Okay, we're looking at 1 7/8 inches. I'm going to mark that 1 7/8 inches. Okay, and then I'm going to mark it in the other direction. So this up here should be equal, and I've got 1 7/8 if I go to the top of her head. So we've got this is equal to 1 7/8. Okay, now depending on how zoomed in, like how much space the person's head's taking up, it might be a different dimension, depending on, you know, maybe the person themselves. But these distances should be equal. In a profile view, the distance from the inside corner of the eye to the chin should be equal, so I'm going to count this as the chin, okay, should be equal to the distance between the outside corner of the eye to the back of the ear. Okay, so I'm going to draw this, and just to clarify, The inside corner of the eye is right here. Okay, the outside corner is going to be right here. Now, Mrs. Crowley is wearing mascara, actually eyeliner, and so I have to be careful about what I'm considering to be the outside corner. But here's the inside corner, okay, to here, and I'm going to measure this distance. We've got 1 7/8 again. 1 7/8. Okay, and then this distance from the outside corner of our eye to the back of our ear, also 1 7/8. Okay, 1 7/8. And actually, I'm gonna put the 1 7/8 on the inside of her face. That way it doesn't disrupt her lip when I look at it later. Okay, 1 7/8. In a 3/4 view, the distance between the inside corner of the eye and the chin should be equal to the inside corner of the eye to the back of the ear. So we don't have a 3/4 view. A 3/4 view would be anywhere in between a front view and a full profile view. So we don't need to worry about that for this exercise, but it's good to know. The central, we've already talked about the central axis. The length of the nose is usually 1/3 to 1/2 of the distance between the eye level line and the bottom of the chin. Okay, so the length of the nose is going to be from the base of the nose to the eye line. So I'm going to measure that distance. That distance is 11/16. Okay, and then the total here is 1 7/8. So half of 1 7/8 would be, okay, that would be 15/16, I think, is going to be the halfway point. So 15/16 is going to be here, but 1/3 is going to be 9/16. So that is right here, I think. Okay, so Mrs. Crowley's length of the nose falls between 1/3 and 1/2, because that's what I've got there in between the eye line and the chin. So her nose is in the correct position, or is the correct length. Okay, the center line of the mouth where the two lips meet is typically 1/3 of the distance from the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin. So we're going to measure this distance. This is, well, actually, I'm going to mark, this is 1/3 and this is 1/2. Okay. From the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin. So if I put this right here, where I've marked the bottom of the nose, I'm looking at 1 3/16. Okay, so if I divide that by 3, because I'm looking at 3/8 as being the center, and that's where her mouth line is. Her lips meet right here. Fantastic. Okay, so far my proportions are pretty good. I'm gonna make that line a little darker. The reason that we're using a mechanical pencil for this is just so that we can make these nice sharp lines without having a bunch of mess. I don't like drawing with a mechanical pencil, but writing with a mechanical pencil and doing like this kind of technical drafting is good. We're not really doing technical drafting, but we're doing something like it because we're trying to show measurements in a really exact way. Okay, the two eyes of the face are usually about 1 eye width apart from each other. So if I measure the width of her eye, which is going to be from corner to corner, in this drawing, her eye is a 1/2 inch big, okay? So then I want to measure from the inside corner of the eye to the other inside corner of the eye. That is also a 1/2 inch. Her other eye is 1/2 inch. And then if we go off the page, this is a 1/2 inch. So or not, this is not a half an inch. Her head is a little bit turned. So it works on this side, but not on this side. So her face is either a little bit narrower, or there's something about the way she's turned that doesn't quite show the full width. But the full frontal view of the face, from the frontal view of the face, the width of the face is about 5 eye widths, and it's 1 eye in between. So just to give you like kind of a demonstration, if we imagine somebody was 5 eyes wide, that would be roughly the width that they are. But she's turned a little bit to this direction, so if I had her totally front view, maybe she'd be 5 eye widths. Otherwise, she's just a little bit thin. Okay, the edge of the nostrils are typically right below the inside corner of the eyes. So we're gonna measure from, make a line, I guess I should say, from the inside corner of the eyes down. Okay, and that's falling about at the edge of the nostrils. So that is correct. The outside corners of the mouth are usually right below the center of the eye. So we can count the pupils as the center of the eye. And if we draw a line going straight down, we meet the corner of the mouth. The top of the ears are at the same height as the eye line. This is not true, because the eye line, I have to count the eye line at the top of her eyelids, and then I meet the edge of the ears. So we do the same thing over here. Okay. The bottom of the earlobes are across from the space between the nose and the mouth. So I can see this on the profile view, but the bottom of the earlobes are gonna fall right here in between the nose and the mouth, right there. And that is true. And the width of the neck is probably wider than you expect. So I talked about the width of the neck a couple of places here, but do you see how her neck actually comes almost out to the edge of her hair is here on this side, but comes almost out to the edge of her face? And that might not be what you expect, but you don't want to draw a neck like this. It's gonna look like her head's not properly supported. So this is something that you always just have to observe really carefully, the contour of, find some reference points, and constantly look at the person in your drawing. Okay, eyes can be vary widely in shape and can be asymmetrical on the same face. So if I look at Mrs. Crowley's eyes, I would say that this one slopes down just a little bit more than this one, but she's young, and it is something that gets exaggerated as you're older, the asymmetry of your face, but Mrs. Crowley is young and beautiful, so I would say for the most part her eyes are symmetrical. The highest point of the curve of the upper lid is usually near the inside corner of the eye. So the highest point of where her upper lid comes is usually going to be to the inside of the pupil. And on her, it's going to be right here. I'm going to make a little dot. Okay, now she's wearing eyeliner, which cheats a little bit and makes it hard for me to see her actual eyelid, but that's okay. I just have to look closely. The lowest point of the curve is usually near the outside corner of the eye. Okay, and then we're gonna mark the inside corner of the eye, which we already have. And then we're gonna observe this contour really carefully. So right now I'm just tracing it on this piece of paper, but I wanna think about this as I'm doing it, the inside corner to that upper curve to the outside corner, because that's what I'm gonna have to draw on my paper as I observe from this photograph of her when I actually go to do the final portrait. So I wanna think about that relationship. The iris of the eye is circular, but is usually partially covered by eyelids. Closely observe the whites of the eyes as a form of negative space. So here are her irises. Her irises are the colored part. Now she would have an iris that's fully circular, but rarely can you actually see all the way around somebody's eyes. irises in their eyes. So we're just going to trace the negative space just to start to think about how much of this space can I see. And I can do that over here. I can hardly see anything of her eyes, of the whites of her eyes over here on this picture. Eyelashes may not be apparent, but notice if they create a darkened effect on any contours of the eyes. Darkening the line where you see eyelashes can be effective in showing them. Okay, so I can see her eyelashes right here. I can also see her eyeliner. That's going to be important when I go ahead and actually draw her. I'm going to darken this just a little bit because that's what I would do if I were going to draw her. And I want to think about these contours. Eyelids have thickness and may be observed, especially in profile view. So I'm going to look at this colored one, but you can see that her eyelid actually comes out quite a bit more than her actual eyeball, and that's because there's a thickness there. And when you can observe that, it helps add dimension to your drawing. Value changes around the eye can be critical to show the dimension of the shapes and contours of the eye. So I'm going to look for that. I'm going to look here in the colored one because it's easier to see. But you can see that she's got some dark shadow right here that defines her eye. We can see that the light's coming from this direction, and then the nose has shadows that are falling on this side of her face. There's more nuance to it than that. Her lids have shadows, below her eyes have shadows. So each person is going to have a little bit different like bulge here, how their eye relates to the skin underneath their eye. Some people have a more circular area where you can see the shape or the contour of their eyeball, and then other people it's more hidden. So that's something to observe that's going to help you make the unique likeness of the person that you are drawing. The contour of the nose can be seen in profile and 3/4 view, and should be carefully observed. From a frontal view, the shadow on the face and on one side of the nose is helpful in drawing the definition. So here I have this nice contour that I can see really clearly in profile view, right? To see the shape of her nose, I can look at how much it comes in at the bridge of her nose, how much, you know, her actual nose sticks out compared to the rest of her face. I have a really clear view over here with the profile view. Here, I'm gonna have to show her nose based on this shadow here and like a slight little bit of shadow here, the edge of her nostrils. So I'm gonna think about the light and shadow in a little while, but if we look, there's much more subtle ways of telling the shape of the nose from the front than from the side. Okay, observe where the tip of the nose is in relationship to the base where it meets the face. Okay, so we're talking about right here where the base of her nose meets her face. Mrs. Crowley has a really nice nose. Finding the relationship between these 2 points is very helpful in orienting the nose properly to the rest of the face. So what I want to do is look at this point in relationship to this point, and like how much is the edge of her nose actually sticking out from her face. And here I can notice how does the shadow and line work here as her nose connects to her face. That's going to be helpful to me because that's going to vary from person to person a little bit and help define the person themselves. Okay, in profile view, look for the bridge of the eyes in relationship to the base of the nose. This relationship is critical to finding your proper profile. So here's the bridge of her eyes and here's the base of her nose, and I want to think about like how far out is that and how far down. Now I've already thought about the length of the nose being 1/3 to 1/2 of the distance between the bridge of the nose and the chin. But I want to think about this relationship, and that's going to help me. I can put a little marker here in my drawing and a little marker here Then I can put a marker here on the point of her nose and I can follow this contour, just like we would with any other kind of measuring that we would do in a drawing, because we're always looking for relationships between shapes and points in space. When drawing a profile, utilize the negative space to help you find shapes and contours. So when I'm actually going to draw her as a profile, I want to think about, okay, well, what is the shape of this gray background? Because I can get distracted as I'm drawing this and think about, well, look at her nose and I need to make something that looks like a nose, and then here's her lips and I need to look at something that looks like, or I need to draw something that looks like her lips. But if I'm drawing the gray instead of her face, then that can help me at least double check or think about it differently. Observation of what you can actually, now we're on to the mouth. Observation of what you can actually see is critical in this area. All right, we're gonna look at the color version of Mrs. Crowley in order to demonstrate this. A strong line around the mouth is not going to look natural. The contours of the lips vary in color and weight. So you can see that there's a color change here on the bottom of her lips. She has a little bit of a natural like darkening at the top. She also might be wearing a little bit of makeup. But there's not a big value shift between here and here and here and here. So I don't want to make an outline like lipstick when I'm drawing her. I want to just really observe what's actually there. This is a little bit like the neck. I want to be careful of what I'm actually seeing. The line where the lips meet is a variable contour and changes in value and direction. Okay, so this contour right across is going to kind of go up and down and around. And I want to observe that really carefully, because every time she smiles, she is going to have a similar way of parting her lips, and that's part of her uniqueness as a person, what she looks like. And somebody's smile matters a lot, and it's easy to kind of go overkill in the mouth. So I want you to be sensitive here when we get to it. But for now, I just want you to trace this line, think about where it is and what shape it is. This line between the lips and the shape of the corners of the mouth are important to describing the personality and expression of the person you are depicting. So that's kind of what I just said. Compare the relative fullness and shape of the upper and lower lips. Does one protrude? Can you find landmarks in the contours and shapes that you can use to make this comparison as you draw? So I want to think about, well, how tall is this lip compared to this lip? And what is the difference in shape, etc. Over here, this profile helps me get like a three-dimensional idea of her mouth a little bit. And her bottom lip is a little bit puffier than her upper lip, but they're about even. She has nice full lips, quite beautiful. In a profile, note the difference between the tip of the nose, okay, we've already found that, the base of the nose, we've already found that, and the two lips in comparison to each other. So we can put one here and one here, and use these areas as landmarks to see the angles between the shapes. So I want to think about, like, how are these lining up, okay, in relationship to each other, and then how are they lining up in terms of like angular relationship. But these three things are kind of in a line for her. That is not true for all people. But look at this beautiful profile of her lips, and she looks so peaceful and happy. In the profile, observe the negative space to help sensitively define the contour of the face. All right, the placement of the ears is vital to all views of the face. The other thing that we said in the beginning of this handout, which I didn't read, is that boring, uninteresting parts of the face can easily get missed and like squished together. But we know that, and so we're going to be really careful when we do ultimately draw this. The ear is a little bit of a landmarker, but we're going to make sure that there's plenty of space between her ear and her cheek, or her ear and her nose, and her ear and her shoulder, to make sure that we're not compressing any of these areas, because that's going to help our realism and also capture the profile, the likeness of the person that we're looking at. Use the ear as a landmark in relationship to other features. Note the overall shape of the ear, the length, the roundness or squareness, the width at the top and the bottom. Are the earlobes attached or unattached? And I would say that she kind of has attached earlobes. I don't know. I drew over the base of her ear. I think she has attached earlobes for the most part, but she's wearing earrings that look pretty heavy, so I think they're kind of making her her earlobe dangle a little bit. And if I'm gonna observe this, she's got a nice roundness at the back. This is like a half a heart. Mrs. Crowley, we love you. Okay. And then again, I say about the neck, it may be wider than you expect. Carefully observe where the neck connects to the shape of the head. Use negative space to find the contour of the neck. Okay, so I can do that. Men often have a larger Adam's apple, so sometimes right here you're going to see like a little more of a protrusion, especially in men, that can especially be seen in profile view. The back of the neck connects to the head at a place that is vertically higher than where the front of the neck connects. So if you have somebody with short hair, or you have, you know, well, like a man who doesn't have a lot of hair, you're going to be able to see this a lot better. But her neck is connecting about here. So if this is where her skull is, and this is going to be almost impossible to see on this video, like her spinal cord has to go up in here, and this is where she's connecting. And then down here is where her neck is connecting to her body. So you can see the difference between those 2 points. So always expect it to be lower in the front, just because of the way our anatomy is constructed as human beings. And then the back of the neck typically connects the head at a point that is horizontal to the bottom of the ear. So if I go from the bottom of the ear, I'm gonna get my ruler, and I go across, that is about where her neck is going to connect. And I can't actually see it. It's about, you know, 1/16 of an inch above where I drew, but I'm probably wrong when I was drawing. So we'll draw that line across just to clarify. Be sure that the shoulders are the correct width in relation to the width of the head and the neck. Okay, so I'm not worried about that here. This portrait was actually cropped so that you could see your person's face a lot bigger than it otherwise would have been. So, but we can imagine the shoulders in another scenario where you would be able to see them, that you want to make sure they're the correct width. Because if I make these shoulders really wide, it's going to make her head look small. If I make the shoulders too small, her head is going to look really big. So that proportion is important, and you can find markers for that, like in relationship to the ears, or what angle, or how long, how many, you know, face widths across or the person's shoulders. You want to find some way to kind of judge that dimension. The shoulders may not be straight across from each other in the posture of your model. Observe the angle of the axis between the shoulders and may be balanced by a tilt in the head of your model. So her head is tilted a little bit this way, and so that would actually make me expect that her shoulders are going to be slightly tilted this way, but I can't quite tell. She's straight enough that I'm not worried about it. Okay, as far as her hair, I'm going to observe the overall shape of the hairline using negative space to capture this accurately. So for right now, I'm just going to draw her hair. I'm going to trace this contour, and that's going to familiarize me with how her hair is actually shaped. She's got some nice tendrils here. It was a little bit windy, sunny day, which is very flattering. It helps animate the portrait instead of her just standing there. It also makes the person who's having their picture taken feel a little bit, I don't know, more in motion, I guess. A little bit more casual. When drawing, make strokes that follow the direction that the hair grows and falls. So I can make a couple of strokes of her hair. You're not really going to be able to see this, but I can think about where her hair grows in direction compared to, like, she's got it tucked behind her ear, so it's kind of traveling back this way. This one is, the hair's kind of going in different directions here. And I'm just going to trace this on this photograph to just get myself used to looking for these contours. And that's going to help me understand how these are separated. We got kind of chunks here. So we have contours within the big contour of her hair. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to want to think about when we do the drawing of the hair. Okay, account for the presence of the skull beneath the hair. You can indicate this lightly in your drawing as a construction line. So Mrs. Crowley, her hair is pretty tight to her skull, but I could just draw where I think her skull is right here to give myself an idea of where it is in relationship to the skull. Maybe you have somebody that has a really tall hairdo, or their hair puffs out, or there's all kinds of, you know, things that could go on. The person could be wearing a hat, or something else that really causes the hairline to go above where the skull actually would be. Eyebrows need similar treatment. So we're gonna observe the overall shape. Okay, her eyebrows are not symmetrical in this photograph, and that could be because there's light shining on this side, so it just looks like these are a different shape. But I want to think about, and I can do this better from this one, but I want to think about like what direction are the hairs going. These are things that matter. And in class we talked about people who, like, all of us have seen an older woman who drew their eyebrows on in the wrong color. You don't want your person to look like that. You want to observe like the actual value of their eyebrows. Value changes across, you want to observe value changes across the eyebrow in relationship to the skin around the eyebrow. So in other words, don't make your eyebrows too dark. Usually is the problem. Eyebrows may not be symmetrical. Observe each carefully and then in comparison. So as I'm drawing these, I'm going to think about, well, how high is this one compared to this one, or how far does this one come out compared to this one? Value structure. So light and shadow is your main tool as an artist to show dimensionality in your drawing. We talk about this pretty frequently. Break down the shapes into simplified forms, showing them as construction contour lines on your drawing. So I'm gonna look at this colored one a little bit. I can see that there's a shadow here that I can't quite see in this photocopy, because this is the kind of stuff that doesn't show up when you increase the brightness and lower the contrast. But I'm just going to think about, like, where is the light and shadow falling on her face? And this is basically light and shadow on a sphere. Now, if I look at this, I see she's got a light area here and a light area here, and that helps show me what the shape of her lip is, and it kind of defines her expression a little bit. She's kind of smiling in a joking way. She's probably laughing at me, actually. I didn't take the picture, but I was standing right there, so she's probably like, oh my gosh, Mrs. Wolanka, when's it gonna be over? But delightful facial expression here on Mrs. Crowley. This picture makes you want to be her friend and find out what joke she heard that made her kind of do that with her face. Okay, I'm gonna try to just make some big contours here, because I'm gonna want to look at this again. We're making a value study. Okay, and then she's got some shadows here on her neck, which help her define like where her face is different from her neck. And it helps us see that, you know, her hair is creating shadow here. Okay, so I'm gonna count those as my areas of shadow. Let me stick another one in here. Yeah, okay. That's gonna help me think about it when I draw it. Identify your light sources to help you predict light and shadow in order to help yourself identify the shapes of value. So this is just like when we study light and shadow on a sphere. In this case, I mostly need this one to tell, but this is my light source. So my light source is a natural light source. So there's my sun, and then here is the direction of the light source. Okay, so that's gonna help me remember when I'm drawing this, that this side is gonna be dark and this side is gonna be light. And I can look for all the things that we usually have on a sphere when we put it under light and shadow. I've got reflected light, I've got a core shadow, I've got cast shadow. And it's obviously complex and repeated here, but that's basically what we're looking at. So we can identify some of those areas of light and shadow on her face, and that will help us observe them more closely if we know what we're looking for. This is diffused light, and the light is not really far away. It's, I want to say it was a sunny day, but I can't remember. Okay, observe relative value between adjacent shapes. This is something we're mostly going to do when we draw, but we could start to lay some things in here, like how dark are these shapes going to be relative to other shapes. So this right here may not be a whitest white. It looks like my whitest white is going to be here on the nose and then over here. So as I'm drawing, I want to think about where are the value changes, how big are the value changes from area to area. And I also want to think about edges. Is it a soft edge between this shadow and this shadow, or is there a hard edge? So I've got a little bit of a harder edge here and here than I do like maybe right here, or especially here, it's just gently diffusing. So you want to think about those things. Some of that variety of edges helps add interest and also make the portrait feel more realistic. It just requires careful observation and practice. And then observe the edges of your value. Yeah, we already talked about that. Okay. Also, you want to observe relative value overall. I skipped this one. Where are the lightest lights, the darkest darks? We talked about that a little bit, but you don't want, like, say her eyes to be super dark and then her hair isn't also super dark. You want to think about like which values are counterbalancing each other and spreading that value across the portrait, because it's easy to get stuck in one area and say, okay, well, I want like her pupils to be really dark black, but then you don't find the other darkest darks elsewhere in the portrait, and so it looks like her eyes are out of place or penetrating in some weird way. So you always want to like look, where are these values repeated all over the composition, and that's going to help you create unity of your value scheme. So we've got to always hold the whole thing and the detail in our head at the same time, which is challenging. Okay, the next section of this is changes of position. So this is mostly talking about a 3/4 view, or if somebody moves or is looking up or down. And we're not going to talk about that actually, because it's not applicable to this view of the figure. We're going to save that for a more complicated position of a head, and we'll talk about that another day. Okay, thanks for being here.